When we look back at the golden era of American muscle, our collective memory tends to drift toward a very specific type of violence. We think of Christmas tree lights dropping at a drag strip. We think of massive big block engines, hood scoops the size of mailboxes, and tires melting into clouds of white smoke as cars struggle to find traction in a straight line. The narrative of the late 1960s and early 1970s is almost exclusively dominated by the quarter mile. It was an era of brute force where displacement was king and aerodynamics were barely an afterthought. But if you look closer, past the drag strips and the stoplight Grand Prix, there was a different kind of war being fought. A war that required something American automakers weren't famous for: finesse. This was the domain of the SCCA Trans Am series. While the GTOs and Chevelles were ruling the drag strips, the pony cars, the Mustangs, Camaros, Javelins, and Firebirds, were locked in gladiatorial combat on twisting road courses across the continent. This wasn't about who could go fast in a straight line. It was about who could brake late, hit the apex, and survive door-to-door contact at 140 miles per hour. Every major manufacturer wanted a piece of this action. It was a marketing goldmine. To compete, however, you couldn't just bring a race car to the track. You had to prove that you sold a version of that car to the public. This requirement, known as homologation, gave us some of the most fascinating machines of the 20th century, and sitting right at the top of that food chain, possessing perhaps the most attitude of them all, was the 1970 Plymouth AAR Cuda.
The story of the AAR Cuda isn't just about a car. It is about a frantic 5-week period of manufacturing madness and a desperate bid for road course glory. To understand this machine, you have to understand the letters on the fender: AAR. They stand for All American Racers, a legendary outfit founded by racing royalty Dan Gurney and Carroll Shelby in 1964. By 1970, Plymouth had partnered with Gurney's team to take the fight to Ford and Chevrolet in the Trans Am series, but the rules were strict. To race the car, Plymouth had to build 2,500 street-legal versions available to the general public. Plymouth didn't just meet the quota, they exceeded it, cranking out roughly 2,700 units in a production blitz that lasted little more than a month. The platform for this weapon was the E-body. Now, Mopar fans will instantly recognize the E-body as the skeleton shared by the Plymouth Barracuda and its corporate cousin, the Dodge Challenger. It is easy to assume that these two cars were identical twins wearing different makeup, but that is a misconception that ignores the engineering nuances of the time. While they shared engines and suspension architecture, the Cuda was actually the athlete of the family. The engineers at Plymouth carved 2 inches out of the wheelbase compared to the Challenger. The body was 5 inches shorter overall. And crucially, the Cuda was 1.7 inches narrower.
In the world of grand touring and highway cruising, those numbers mean nothing. But on a tight, technical racetrack or a winding canyon road, a shorter wheelbase and a narrower track mean everything. It made the Cuda significantly more tossable, more eager to rotate, and slightly more nervous, in a good way. It was a car that wanted to change direction, whereas the Challenger was happier settling in for the long haul. This inherent agility made the Cuda the natural choice for the Trans Am effort. However, the real magic of the ARA Cuda wasn't just in its dimensions. It was in the heart of the beast. In the Trans Am series, engine displacement was limited to 305 cubic inches. The race cars screamed around tracks with high-revving, D-stroked V8s pushing near 450 horsepower. Obviously, Plymouth couldn't put a high-strung, race-spec engine into a car sold to dentists and accountants. It wouldn't survive the warranty period. But the rules stated the street car had to use the same engine block architecture. This meant the ARA Cuda needed a small block. At the time, if you wanted respect on the street, you bought a 440 or the legendary 426 Hemi. Those engines were heavy iron anchors that sat over the front axle, destroying weight distribution and making the car handle like a shopping cart full of cinder blocks. For the ARA, Plymouth utilized the 340 cubic inch V8. This is, without a doubt, one of the most celebrated small blocks ever to come out of Detroit. Ask anyone who raced in that era, and they will tell you the 340 was a revelation. It was punchy, durable, and surprisingly high-revving.
For the AAR specification,
Plymouth didn't just pull a standard 340 off the shelf, they turned it up to 11. They equipped it with a specialized block, heavily fortified reciprocating internals, and a ferocious 10.5:1 compression ratio. But the pièce de résistance sat on top of the intake manifold, 3 two-barrel Holley carburetors. This setup, known affectionately as the six-pack, was a masterpiece of mechanical fuel delivery. At idle and cruising speeds, you were running on the center carburetor for reasonable efficiency. But stomp the loud pedal and the outboard carbs would crack open, dumping fuel and air into the cylinders with the subtlety of a fire hose. On paper, Plymouth rated this engine at 290 horsepower at 5,000 RPM. Looking back, this is one of the great lies of the automotive industry. It was an open secret that manufacturers were severely underrating their engines to keep insurance agents from having heart attacks. In reality, a healthy 346-pack in AAR trim was pushing somewhere between 340 and 350 horsepower, with 370 foot-pounds of torque. That is the mythical 1 horsepower per cubic inch ratio that engine builders dream of. It combined the lightweight characteristics of a small block with power figures that embarrassed many big blocks of the day. The driving experience was visceral. You could spec the car with a heavy-duty 727 torque flight automatic, but the soul of this car was found in the A833 4-speed manual. This transmission came with the iconic pistol grip shifter, a piece of interior design that felt less like a gear lever and more like the trigger of a weapon. Connecting that power to the pavement was a sure grip rear end with 3.55 gears as standard, though masochists who hated highway driving could option 3.91 gears for neck-snapping acceleration. Visually, Plymouth ensured that you would never mistake an AAR Cuda for a standard Barracuda. This car was shouting its pedigree from every angle. The design team implemented a strobe stripe that ran the length of the car. It started thick at the front and tapered off into thin lines at the rear, creating a sense of motion even when the car was parked. The hood was a lightweight fiberglass unit, painted matte black to reduce glare for the driver, a functional touch taken directly from the track. And unlike many muscle styling cues of the era, the hood scoop was fully functional, ramming cold air directly into those thirsty Holley carburetors. Perhaps the most aggressive feature, however, was the exhaust. Plymouth routed the exhaust pipes out the side of the car, dumping them right in front of the rear tires. These trumpet exhausts didn't just look cool, they provided a stereo experience for the driver and anyone standing on the sidewalk. It was loud, rude, and absolutely perfect. To complete the handling package, the car borrowed suspension components from the Challenger TA, including beefier sway bars and heavy-duty shocks. It rode on 15x7 wheels, which sounds laughably small by modern standards, but in 1970, that was serious rubber. When the magazines of the day got their hands on the AAR Cuda, the numbers were respectable. It would sprint from 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds and run the quarter mile in the mid-14s. It wasn't a drag strip king. The Hemi Cuda would eat it alive in a straight line, but that wasn't the point. The AAR was a balanced precision instrument in a world of sledgehammers.
However, we have to address the elephant in the room. For all its engineering prowess, for all the specialized parts, and the connection to Dan Gurney, the AAR Cuda was effectively a failure on the racetrack. In the 1970 Trans Am season, the car struggled. It was plagued by reliability issues and stiff competition from the dominant Ford Mustangs and AMC Javelins. The factory Plymouth team finished 5th in the championship, scoring a meager 15 points. It was a humiliating result for such a high-effort program. Plymouth pulled the plug after just 1 year. The AAR Cuda was a one-year-only wonder, born in 1970 and dead by 1971. But strangely, that failure is exactly what cemented its legacy. Because they only built them for 1 year, and because they were built in such a frantic, condensed time frame, the AAR Cuda became instantly collectible. It represents a moment in time where a major manufacturer threw caution to the wind, built a radical homologation special, and put it on sale to the public. Today, the registry accounts for about 1,500 survivors out of the original 2,700. If you want to put one in your garage, you are looking at a serious investment. A driver quality example. something you wouldn't be afraid to take to Cars and Coffee, hovers around the $84,000 mark. But if you want a numbers-matching, concourse condition survivor in a high-impact color like sassy grass green or Moulin Rouge, you were easily talking six figures.
The 1970 Plymouth AAR Cuda is a reminder that winning isn't everything. Sometimes the cars that lose on Sunday are the ones we remember most fondly decades later. It was a car that tried to bridge the gap between the crude horsepower wars of Detroit and the sophisticated road racing of Europe. It was loud, it was brash, and it handled better than any Mopar had the right to. So the question remains for the modern enthusiast. With 80 grand in your pocket, do you hunt down a piece of authentic Trans Am history? Or do you take a standard Barracuda shell, drop in a modern crate engine, and build the car Plymouth wished they had in 1970? It's a debate between preserving history and perfecting performance. But one thing is certain, when you hear a 340 six-pack inhaling through that functional hood scoop and blasting through side pipes, you aren't just hearing an engine, you're hearing the sound of the wildest summer in American automotive history.